Hi, I'm Agent 1.
And I'm Agent 2.
And we have a message for you. Today, we're diving into the most complex and persistent issues that humanity faces: poverty, defined as the inability to access essential resources like food, shelter, and healthcare. Poverty can be divided into absolute, when individuals earn below the threshold needed to meet their basic needs, and relative, when individuals earn less compared to others in society. But what makes poverty such a wicked problem?
Poverty is complex and interconnected. It's not just about money, it's about access to education, healthcare, nutrition, and employment. These elements feed into each other, creating a cycle. For example, a lack of education limits job opportunities, leading to low income, which means poor healthcare, further limiting productivity. This cycle traps people in poverty.
Stakeholders involved: governments, NGOs, businesses, and local communities, and it gets even more complicated. Different groups have different goals. For instance, in Australia, the rising cost of living, housing shortages, and financial instability are affecting the most vulnerable groups like children, but government policies often don't address their immediate needs effectively.
Because poverty is shaped by unique historical, political, and cultural contexts. For instance, in 2023, nearly 700 million people were living in less than an income of $2.15 a day. But in Australia, in 2024, rising costs, especially for housing, are driving more people into poverty.
There are many factors influencing poverty. Let's start with the economic environment. What helps and what hinders?
Economic growth helps because it creates jobs and supports small businesses, offering people a chance to break the poverty cycle. Take Bangladesh, where microfinance programs help people start small businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. But economic crises, like the one caused by COVID, push more people into poverty as businesses close and jobs are lost.
Inequality is another big issue. The richest 10% control 52% of the world's income, leaving just 8.5% for the poorest half of the population. That's a huge barrier for poverty alleviation.
In the social environment, social safety nets like welfare and universal health care are critical. Countries like Denmark show how strong welfare systems can reduce poverty, but structural inequality, like gender and racial discrimination, makes it harder for marginalized groups to escape poverty. For example, women in South Sudan and Chad often face educational and employment barriers that keep them in poverty.
And let's not forget the political environment. Good governance and political stability, like in Finland, help create policies that reduce poverty. But in places like Indonesia, corruption undermines efforts to reduce poverty. There have been many top-down initiatives like World Bank infrastructure projects in Indonesia, but they often fail to reach the poorest due to corruption and poor management. In South Africa, government programs like child support grants aim to alleviate poverty, but bureaucratic inefficiencies hinder their success.
On the other hand, bottom-up approaches like Grameen's bank microfinance programs in Bangladesh have been more successful in empowering people, especially women, to start businesses and reduce poverty. And grassroots efforts like Kenya's Village Savings and Loan Associations have been successful at a community level.
The most effective approach, though, is a combined strategy. In South Sudan, international organizations provide vital aid, but local communities lead their own reconstruction, ensuring the solutions are culturally relevant.
But the question is, will we meet the Sustainable Development Goal 1 to eradicate poverty by 2030? Given the political, social, and economic challenges, it seems impossible at the world's current state. That's why poverty is considered a wicked problem.
Let's now look at some local and regional examples. In Australia, poverty is more concentrated in rural areas, affecting Indigenous Australians, people with disabilities, and single parents, which are socially excluded. Wealth, social, and economic inequality, poor access to healthcare and education, and limited housing still leaves 3.3 million Australians below the poverty line.
And in Callaghan, a suburb of Australia, poverty in particular is particularly high due to low-paying jobs, especially among students. Although they benefit from national programs, their limited access to infrastructure like public transport makes it much harder for them to escape poverty.
Both cases show that access to resources like jobs, healthcare, and education is key to breaking the poverty cycle. However, the lack of infrastructure in more isolated areas makes it harder to improve economic conditions, leading to greater inequality. Poverty remains a pervasive and wicked problem. It's systemic, involving economic, social, and political factors that vary across regions and cultures. The complex interplay of these factors make poverty hard to address. We can see that while developed nations like Finland offer better social support and policies, developing nations face more systemic barriers.
Solving poverty requires systems-based understanding, collaboration across borders, and long-term sustainable solutions. Without that, SDG 1 might remain an unattainable goal by 2030. But with the right combination of strategies, we can hope for a better future.
So, what are you gonna do?